From Charles Oliveira's perspective, going into his first fight with Islam Makhachev, the only glimmer of a weakness that Makhachev had shown during his MMA career was a flash TKO loss against Adriano Martins. Therefore, when Makhachev started their fight with sharp boxing, there was little for Oliveira to be optimistic about. Since that fight and the bout with Volkanovski, Makhachev has looked far more human. Volkanovski exposed several weaknesses that will likely apply if Makhachev continues to compete at an upper UFC level. Firstly, Khabib and Makhachev's camp said they were going to ragdoll Volkanovski in a Thai clinch.
Volkanovski, clinch, lot of knees, he's gonna eat a lot of knees, he's gonna take his all energy, Thai clinch gonna kill him.
Which they failed to do. Secondly, the fight showed that Makhachev's sense of timing and distancing on his kicking isn't as good as on his punching. Thirdly, Volkanovski showed he could get up from Makhachev's takedowns. Lastly, and I think most critically, Makhachev was pushed to the absolute limit cardio-wise, and you could say from the look on his face in the closing moments, on the brink of being broken, if not actually broken, as if there was a sixth round, Makhachev would have been looking for a way out and may have crumpled to the ground from some innocuous looking strikes. That being said, whilst he was pushed to the limit, he did fight the number one pound for pound fighter in the world and win a clear-cut decision. On the Oliveira side, he has had one fight since where he looked good, stuffing Beneil Dariush's attempts to pass his guard and also eventually getting back up from the bottom. He also showed his kicks are a threat. So looking at the last fight, if you can draw any conclusions from it, I think it's fair to say Oliveira got himself in trouble pressuring towards the clinch. He also got in trouble in the clinch itself due to Makhachev's throwing skills. It makes sense for Oliveira to look for the clinch in some fights, for instance against the flat-footed, boxing-focused Dustin Poirier. It does not make any sense for Oliveira to pursue the clinch against Makhachev. Firstly, because Makhachev is good with upper body grappling. Secondly, because Islam has active footwork and has used a preemptive pendulum step in most, if not all, of his UFC fights. Stylistically, Islam seems to like working punches against guys who are pressuring towards him. If you're looking for a range where Oliveira is absolutely better than Makhachev, then it's really going to be a kicking range. Makhachev has had a habit of throwing a left high kick early in his UFC fights. Whilst this does show good flexibility and he does have a taekwondo trainer, off the back of the Volkanovski fight, I think you could say this is an empty threat or more style than substance. Against Dustin Poirier, Oliveira landed some flush right front kicks to the body that looked to knock the wind out of Dustin Poirier. Considering that Makhachev's Muay Thai offense is not the best, I think it's unlikely that his defense is going to be any better than Dustin Poirier's. Another weapon for Oliveira could be leg kicks. The pendulum step that Makhachev uses is far more common in boxing than in kickboxing. Part of the reason for that is that it's difficult to go from bouncing on the spot to posting on one leg to block a kick. Another reason why Oliveira would be wise to keep the fight at long range is because Makhachev's best takedowns are in the clinch. There is a breakdown video by Daniel Cormier on his YouTube channel where he talks about Islam Makhachev's wrestling style. During the interview, he states that Makhachev is not the best at shooting single legs or double legs.
While his wrestling is very good, he's got very specific takedowns. It's not a single leg or a double leg. He's not the best at that.
In terms of the groundwork, Oliveira showed he could handle himself on the ground against Makhachev in the first fight. He eventually got back up after a leg lock attempt. A lot of people have been saying Oliveira should focus on getting back up in preparation for this fight. Whilst this does make sense, Oliveira has been doing jiu-jitsu for so long, he may be set in his ways to an extent. Opportunities to get back up will likely present themselves, but it will be hard for Oliveira to turn into Volkanovski overnight. A problem for Charles is that Makhachev usually has a habit of pulling away later in fights cardio-wise. If you look at Makhachev's fight with Thiago Moises, for instance, there was a clear gulf in cardio by the fourth round. That is part of the reason why, in my opinion, Charles didn't fight the arm triangle as hard as he could have. It was partly because of the skills Makhachev had shown up until that point, and partly because Makhachev had intimidating cardio. With Makhachev being out-cardioed by Volkanovski, who probably has the best cardio in the UFC, the intimidation factor has now been taken away from Makhachev. It's not as if tired fighters don't ever get TKOs, so I think this time Oliveira may hang tough and look for a new round if he gets in trouble. In terms of wrestling, Oliveira does have takedowns, as he was able to take down Michael Chandler. I believe he will have a harder time taking down Makhachev, as he's a more defensively minded fighter. Also, if you listen to Daniel Cormier, leg defense is one of Makhachev's main strengths as a wrestler.
Islam also scores a lot defensively.
While shooting shots aren't Makhachev's main strength, with Oliveira's takedown defense being underdeveloped due to him being comfortable off his back, I do think he should be able to shoot and take Oliveira down at points. So in conclusion, I think the Volkanovski fight would have helped people come a lot closer to developing a game plan to beat Islam Makhachev. Before the fight, I think people focused a lot on the Adriano Martins fight and saw him as being weakest in mid-distance boxing exchanges. This is likely far from the truth. He likely struggles much more at long range, where he isn't great with kicks and shoots solid, if not spectacular, shots. In terms of this fight specifically, personally I think Makhachev will likely win again, but it will be harder this time around. Even though Oliveira will likely come in with a better game plan, I think old habits will die hard for him, so he'll probably get thrown pursuing a clinch at some point. He will probably also gas himself out to an extent, looking for submissions on the ground. This has been my opinion of the forthcoming Oliveira v Makhachev rematch. Let me know in the comments how you see this one going.